Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Slow Takes. I'm one of your hosts, Sam Illingworth from the Slow AI Substack, and I'm joined as ever by...
Hello, my name is Leor from Exploring ChatGPT. How's it going?
And thanks, everyone, very much for joining us on the Substack Live, for checking us out via YouTube, and of course, for listening to us on your podcast directory of choice. If you're in the Substack Live, feel free to use the chat function and to, just get involved with whatever you want to. If you've just come across us, basically, Leor and I meet every Monday and we try to present 5 news stories from the world of AI without any of the hype or without any of the BS. So it's up to you to keep us honest as well. If we ever slip into that hyperbole, feel free to call us out. If you've got your own expertise, feel free to shout us out as well. And we always listen to that, and we're always grateful for your comments and for your dialogue as well. Yeah, again, I failed in my task to find a good piece of AI news this week that deserves to push out some of the, I guess, slightly more malignant stories. So apologies to everyone in advance of that, but hopefully you'll still see that we try to adopt a bit of a center ground as we get to all these points. So just final bit of admin, if you're watching on YouTube or listening on the podcast, please share it to your friends, your colleagues, give us a like, etc. Give us a 5-star rating, give us a review. And if you're on the Substack Live, just hammer that like button, as all of these things help the various algorithms, which, both of us, unfortunately, are beholden to. So first news story this week. Okay. I often use the word wild, but this one is genuinely wild. So for people who don't know, Apple is suing OpenAI. So I think as of last Friday, Apple filed a trade secrets lawsuit against OpenAI, accusing them of poaching its staff and coaching them to smuggle out hardware secrets for OpenAI's first consumer device. So I'll just break it down a little bit, give my take, then I'll pass over to Leor. There's quite a lot going on here. And, OpenAI has been accused of stealing, plagiarizing many different pieces of work, of many different artists, etc. I think what's new for this is that it's obviously Apple, which is one of the top 2 largest companies in the world, according to its, stock price share. And it's also something very, very specific. This is actually about hardware. So apparently, it's a pretty badly kept secret, OpenAI is working towards creating its own device, like their equivalent of the iPhone. And they have been recruiting a lot of staff from Apple. So this lawsuit gets into it, and basically, I think it's 400 staff in the past year or so that they've recruited from OpenAI, which is a huge amount. Now that's, it's not unheard of for that to happen, but as you'd expect, there's due process. So what would happen is, let's say I was working for Apple and I got hired by OpenAI. What I should be doing is telling my immediate line manager straight away, and then I'll probably be put on gardening leave immediately, and my devices will be taken off me. Completely understandable. People don't want to share, say, trade secrets. When you look at the actual detail that's in this lawsuit, some of the practices that are being done by OpenAI that go right to the top, because are insane. And this isn't just accidental malpractice. This is staff being coached on what to do. So this includes, please, for your interview, try to bring along a piece of hardware from Apple offices into the interview room as a kind of show and tell. They also apparently have stepped through staff who are leaving on how to coach them to avoid that gardening leave process so that they can effectively, allegedly, steal trade secrets for as long as possible, leading right the way up to their ultimate employment by Apple. So for me, what's really interesting about this is this isn't the first lawsuit to be brought against OpenAI for alleged theft, but this is of a scale as yet unseen. And if this proves to be true, some of the practices that are being reported go beyond Machiavellian. And I think if they prove to be the case, OpenAI are going to be on the docket for a lot of compensation. So that's my understanding of the story, and I guess my take on it. Leor, would love to hear your thoughts.
Sure. Um, I think that there's no way that this even gets to a jury. I think this is
Wow.
going to settle. I think OpenAI is going to hand them a nice chunk of equity the same way that they're doing with the U.S. government. Um, that's my prediction of what's going to happen here. Because honestly, even though this is a horrible look for OpenAI, this is also a horrible look for Apple. Why are 400 of your employees leaving Apple to go to OpenAI? Right? It's maybe they're more excited about building something new. Maybe they're getting bored at Apple. Um, and also, if this reaches a jury, that I mean, there's going to be a lot of internal emails that are leaked and a lot of fuzzy gray area stuff that probably, especially Apple, doesn't want to be shown to the public. So that's my prediction. It's going to settle. Um, there's one thing that you know the beautiful thing about AI is that you could build anything you want at this point with relatively no money. Um, so, but there's one thing that AI can't buy or build you, and that's connections that money and power can can get you. Like especially in the courtroom, these lawyers are no joke. This could drag on forever, and I don't think that either company wants that. So, a couple numbers here. As Sam mentioned, it is stated by Apple that over 400 of its former employees are now at OpenAI. In addition, OpenAI paid $6.5 billion for IO. It's Johnny Ive's artificial intelligence hardware startup, founded in 2024. Johnny Ives is with OpenAI as well. He was Apple's chief design officer. And just to put it kind of a little bit of context to it, like Sam mentioned, Apple, I don't know if it's one, two, or three in the U.S. stock market. They're worth about 4 trillion. So even though it may not seem like a lot, if they were to receive a nice equity stake from OpenAI, that could be worth a lot of money one day. Even though as of now, I personally think that their valuation is ridiculous, but that's for now.
That's a really interesting take, man. I think you're right about the settle for mainly for the reason of when things get into an open courtroom, trade secrets have to be discussed to some point as well as internal practices. And there's no way that Apple are going to want that to happen, like let alone OpenAI. The equity really interests me. I think you're right, by the way. I think if they do settle, it will be for an equity stake rather than for a cash payout. But what do you think that's going to mean for the other AI tool companies, right? Like Apple, as we've discussed on this podcast before, Apple kind of made the decision last year, right, that they're not going to go down that frontier AI model route and that they're going to be leaning into Gemini and Google to provide a lot of that AI models and tools for their software. However, if they've suddenly got a significant equity stake in OpenAI, like for me, that changes things. And they're like, then it would be like, why wouldn't you just go to OpenAI to provide this model for you? Yeah. I mean, do you see that happening as well? I mean, I think it's going to get really messy, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that could be part of the deal. There's also just this was recent news that Apple is also working with some Chinese models as well now. So there's that. And yeah, absolutely. I think the main thing here is Apple probably realized a while back that their hardware, I mean, like AI is amazing. If you don't have a computer or a phone or something like that, then there's no AI, right? At least for now, until Elon Musk puts a chip in your brain. Um, so, so whoever controls the hardware really controls a big part of this whole future. And I honestly think that that's also part of the settlement will be that Apple will set themselves up for the future to continue to be the hardware giant.
For sure, man. And it's not just the hardware as well, right? It's the Apple Store. Like that App Store is, as we've seen with multiple companies trying to break through. I think again we've talked about this before. The only company I can think of that managed to break that monopoly to some extent was Blizzard. when they kind of pushed through, like when they had a multi-year like litigation with Apple Store about like featuring World of Warcraft, etc. And Apple has so many hands in the game, and we're going to come on to this in a bit as well, that I think they're setting themselves up really nicely. But you are right, to before we move on to the next story, to return to that earlier point, it doesn't look good for Apple. This, like, not only is it, why are 400 people wanting to leave your company, it's also, hey, dude, you need to sort out your security. Like, this is absolutely crazy that people can just go into their office, take away hardware that's being like prototyped and take it into an OpenAI interview.
Yeah.
I don't know. That just seems crazy to me. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think you're right. I think Leo's right. I think it probably will settle out of court, but it'll be interesting to see what that looks like going forward.
Yeah. I
So
also just want to mention, I highly recommend people look into the Danny Ive story and look into why he left Apple. He's a creative guy, and I think he was just bored. I think that his new position under Tim Cook, it was just boring to him, and he wanted something more exciting. And at a certain point, when you have all the money in the world, um, you know, you want to build something new. I think it's worth looking into that story as well. I think that kind of sums up exactly what happened here with those other 400 employees.
yeah, definitely. So next story we've got then is like changing the tax slightly. There was a really interesting story this week out in Australia. So basically, the Australian's Prime Minister, he has announced something really interesting. So Anthony Albanese has said that he set up a new government office of AI, and the main reason for setting this up is that he doesn't want Australia's writers, creators, artists, etc., to have their work used to train AI without compensation. So this is like a really big, for me, flag in the sand, right? He's basically saying we value our creators and our creatives. We're not against AI models. We're not against AI tools, but we want to make sure that our creatives and our industry and our economy are suitably compensated for the work that goes into these models. So for me, it's really interesting. And Australia has been doing a lot of interesting things recently in the tech space, looking at the social media ban, etc. I think there's interesting parallels there, because for me, the biggest stop for this happening is, how the hell are you going to do it? Like, what does that compensation model look like? And it's not to say you shouldn't do it just because we can't envisage that going forward. But from what I've seen of Albanese's statement, it's very good positioning, but I've yet to see how practically it could be enforced. Again, me and you have chatted about this a few times. I think something like the Spotify model, which is not perfect, but which at least moves on from Napster, to make that like ancient analogy now, in terms of people's work being used and some form of compensation happening. So that's my take. I think it's really interesting. I think it's great to see a prime minister or like a leader of a country take a stand, but I would also like to see a bit more concrete suggestions for how this is going to be enacted. And for me, I think it's all going to be about adopting something like a Spotify model.
Yeah.
Would love to hear your take on it.
Yeah, I will say just good luck to Australia. I do think it's a good idea, but yeah, good luck, fighting, let's just say, two companies that haven't gone public yet, with IPOs at a combined value equal to 2 trillion, which is equal to Australia's GDP. Um, that's not including Google. That's not including everybody else.
It's not
So
including any of the Chinese or like,
yeah,
or the like other models as well that are out there that are making waves.
yeah. So good luck with that. I do think it's a valiant cause, valiant effort. Um, I do think that creative as an artist should be compensated. On the other hand, and we've spoken about similar topics before. It's tricky because there's the whole fair use thing. I don't know what the laws are in Australia, and we've spoken about this before, that research, quote unquote, is part of fair use. So these companies could easily just claim that by training their models, on these creatives' work that they're doing research and therefore it is fair use. Similarly, like if anybody's ever seen uh, reaction videos on YouTube that are monetized and not copyrighted, it's because somebody is reacting to a song or reacting to a video, um, and it just creates an infinite loop of content. Um, and yeah, if you also think about it from Australia's point of view, if creatives can be compensated for AI training, which is a very tough cookie to crack. I mean, uh, obviously Australia is going to collect more tax money off of the back end of that as well. Um, so yeah, that's my main take here. But also, I mean, you got the two real frontier labs are just scraping to try and barely break a profit. OpenAI hasn't, Anthropic has barely, and I don't think that they're going to want to give up any of that.
My addition to that would be, we know that a lot of these models are now starting to train basically on previous versions of the models because to some extent they're running out of content. So, and Australia, with all due respect, has a lot of creative expertise and that it could be trained on, but very small compared to global data sets, right? So I think it would be really interesting to see to what extent that becomes important going forward. And it might genuinely be that it's very hard to do this on past work that has been taken without compensation. But as these models become more and more reliant on genuine human creativity going forward, I think that could be really interesting. I think for the stuff that's already been trained, the horse is bolted. I just can't see how you could possibly get that back together. So it's getting on a day, but I think it'll be interesting to set a standard going forward. But then again, how do you possibly impose that? If you've got an Australian frontier model, you could more easily see how that would happen. But for something that comes from another country that is not playing for the rules, really interesting to see how that happens, I think.
Yeah. It seems somewhat impossible because, I mean, basically you have to just assume that AI has been trained on the whole internet. And then even further than that, kind of like synthetic data. So I guess you would just say every single artist and creator that's ever put anything out on the internet deserves a form of compensation for their work. It almost seems impossible to me.
Yeah, no, same. So, but I think that doesn't mean going forward, we can't set more appropriate steps, right? So, for example, we look at Spotify, we can say that when Spotify create, and I know people have issues with this, but Spotify wasn't able to compensate artists prior to Spotify for, work that had been stolen using Napster, for example, and other privacy software, but it was able to do it going forward. So there's going to be, decades of work, I hope, centuries of creative work that's going to be used. So really thinking about ways to compensate the artists going forward is essential. And to some extent, there needs to be a pragmatism in writing off what's gone on before, no matter how that might sit with you, would be my honest take on that.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on to like our third story, and this really, for me, relates to the first very, very heavily. I think this will honestly have gone past a lot of people, Leor. So Google, Microsoft, Salesforce, ServiceNow, also NVIDIA have backed a new open agent standard, which is called ARD. So before I go into the details of this, the important things to say is that Anthropic and OpenAI are not part of this statement. So my understanding of how this ARD works is that basically there will be a kind of standardized set of protocols that agents have to run through in order so that you can ascertain that the outputs from those agents are correct. So what that might look like is, in the very basic terms, I've asked Claude to go and look for a research paper written by Sam Illingworth around poetry and climate change in the year 2018. Rather than potentially fabricating something, it sends out a request. It comes back with what it thinks is the answer. It then runs it past this ARD, which asks a kind of a quality assurance model to make sure that what it's found is correct. And then it passes the answer back to me and comes back with a beautiful paper that I wrote in 2018 called Rhyme and Reason. So on paper, this is a good idea, right? Like it should theoretically reduce fabrication. And I'll give you my honest take on this, then I'd like to hear yours. I don't think this is about standards at all. I think this is about massive companies worried about Anthropic and about OpenAI trying to create a set of standards that they're purposefully excluding them from because those standards are already the normal systems that Apple, Google, NVIDIA, all these massive software companies utilize. So this is it would be a huge setback, I think, for Anthropic and OpenAI. So it makes complete sense that they're not part of this signatory base. And for me, this is nothing at all about Apple, Google, and NVIDIA and other companies wanting to see less fabrications. And it's about them wanting to have more control over the market. That'll be my take, but I don't know if I'm being overly cynical there.
No, I agree. And I see here in the chat, they want control first. I agree. It's a control issue. Whoever writes the standards owns the ecosystem. So yeah, just to give a little bit of a background, what ARD is agent runtime definition. So yeah, here's what they're trying to standardize. They want to standardize how agents identify themselves, how they discover tools, how they communicate, how they pass tasks, how they authenticate, and how they hand work to another agent. So just to sum it up, why is this a story of control? Basically, without standards, every AI company is building their own ecosystem. And with these standards, technically different agents can theoretically work together a little bit better. But it's interesting, but also pretty obvious why OpenAI and Anthropic are making together.
And for me, like it's not like, I don't know, it's not like UNICEF or the UN coming up with these standards, right? It's multi-conglomerates, like tens of trillions of dollars probably of market value organizations deciding what the standards are for the good of humankind, right? Like that's for me where there's an obvious conflict of interest.
Yeah. Interestingly enough, in terms of United Nations, there's actually a recent story I discussed with Chris from TalkSec that apparently China created a sort of United Nations of AI and included almost every country aside from the U.S. And like U.S. allies. So there was like China, Russia, all of those friends and partners that you could possibly think of, and they called it WACO, WAICO. I think that's worth looking into as well. We're clearly moving in a direction of basically pick a side, and depending on where you are geographically in the world, you're going to fall on one side or the other.
Absolutely. And Temitope says in the chat, which is there ever going to be a central AI governing body? No. Like, I mean, for the same reason that I think the United Nations doesn't really work anymore. It was initially set up with huge biases to be towards the Allies after the Second World War, right? And then tried to bring everyone into the fold to create equity, but there's still huge geopolitical schisms within it that would happen across a central AI governing body. And even worse, really, because that AI governing body isn't going to be set up by countries. It's going to be set up by technocrats. It's going to be set up by Sam Altman, Dario Modi, Elon Musk. And do those three people, all from the US, agree on what AI should look like? No. And how many different voices are left from that as well? So I think the idea of a central AI governing body is great, but I also think, and Leo will not agree with me here, that theoretically communism is great, but the way that it's actually enacted requires human beings to be almost, beyond reproach, which we know human beings are not. So that's why, and any central AI governing body would need to have humans in the loop. And we know that human beings are not beyond reproach. And what I can tell you now, what would happen, it would basically, something would happen where there'd be certain middle managers that got involved who then became corrupt on power. We may or may not be seeing that with sporting organizations that may or may not have had a huge sporting event across the world, that may or may not have been hosted in the United States recently, who may or may not be led by somebody who was also corrupted by power. And so I think something like that would happen. But again, I'm probably just being cynical. And yeah, Leo, I don't really think that we all need to be communists, by the way. It was just, just wanted to see your reaction.
Yeah, I think Sam is just jealous that he couldn't make it to New Jersey.
Sam's very jealous he couldn't make it to New Jersey. So yeah, I mean, that standard was really, it's really interesting to see. But just as you see all these positioning statements from like Google and Microsoft being like, hey, OpenAI and Anthropic didn't want to sign up to this. It's like, of course they didn't want to sign up to this, because why would they want to sign up to something that you're going to continue to be the gatekeepers for? Okay, moving on to our fourth story. This one really troubled me. So there's a lawsuit alleging that Meta's AI flagged staff on medical and parental leave for job losses. So Meta needs to make a huge amount of job losses. Okay, now job losses happen. Now, what you would normally happen if you're going through a period of compulsory redundancies is everybody within a team would have their metrics pulled up, and they would see how they're performing against key performance indicators across a varying amount of, I guess, complex identicators, which is very tricky to do. And then their manager would make a decision as to which of their team was the ones that should be put forward for compulsory redundancies and which ones should be held back. Broadly speaking, that's how it works. Now, when you're doing that, according to most jurisdictions, there's certain elements of what they're going through shouldn't be taken into account. So whether or not someone's pregnant, whether or not someone's on medical leave, whether or not someone's on long-term sick, that theoretically shouldn't be taken into account with regards to their compulsory redundancies. Now, if they've not met their targets, but they also happen to be those things as well, that's a different conversation. Now, what the plaintiffs in this legislation are alleging is that managers weren't involved at all, and the AI software was used to basically flag people for redundancy based on disability status, medical records, and things like pregnancy. I mean, if this is true, this is horrific. And, there's no reason to doubt these people. I know there's one of the stories, there was one scientist who works at Meta who was on parental leave because she was about to give birth. She was told 2 days before she gave birth that she would be losing her job during that period of parental leave. I mean, that feels all kinds of wrong to me, but the central issue here should be, I don't think AI tools should ever be used for making those human decisions without having a human in the loop at various stages. So yeah, that's my take, and would love to hear your thoughts on it as well, Leo.
Absolutely. To just carry on with what you said, I don't think human in the loop always means human in control. And I will steal this from Andrea Chiarelli, another creator that I do podcasts with. He had this perfect phrase for it, which is human in the lead. And I think that really points out kind of similar to the situation. Now, as Sam mentioned, so yeah, this specific one situation, who knows how many times this happened. So it was a former Meta scientist, and she alleges that she was on medical leave, then parental leave, and was terminated shortly before giving birth. And she believes that Meta's AI-driven performance review system flagged her. Meta obviously responded and explicitly denied that AI made the firing decision. Now, I don't know what's worse at this point. Did AI fire her, or did a human make the decision to fire her? I don't know what's worse. Probably a human at this point. At least if it was AI, it's not an excuse necessarily, but at least that would show that there's no like real, I don't know, emotion behind it. Either way, pretty horrible. And who knows how many times this really happened. But again, I think we should take Andrea Chiarelli's human in the lead, and maybe almost get rid of human in the loop at this point.
I like that a lot. Absolutely. So like, taking that idea of human in the lead, job losses are horrific, but there needs to be a way to do it. And, one way that you would do it is you would get AI to crunch the numbers and you'd be like, look, here's everyone's performance, here's everyone's KPIs, here's everyone's like outputs, put all this together and give me, as a manager, give me a matrix for my team to tell me how they're performing against actually quantifiable parts of their job description. Then me as a manager, what I will do is I will look at those quantifiable parts and I will also bring into account extenuating factors. To what extent that person is a team player. That's very important. To what extent is that person disruptive to the workforce? And, again, that's what management's all about. Is someone disruptive, but they're like slightly more, is just person A more disruptive than person B, but person A's outputs are worth 10 times that of person B's. Yeah, that's what human in the lead is about. That's what good management, that's what good leadership is about. If an AI tool has just flagged this and instantly said, fire that person, and no one's checked, and they've literally just said yes, that's really bad, like really bad.
Yeah.
And there's some great, Philip makes the point, is this what happened with Oracle as well? That I think this is what happened with Oracle. A lot of these massive redundancies where also AI might be being blamed, and it's difficult. It's important to delineate between the two things. There's those instances where job losses need to take place and the company is saying that it's because we need to make savings for AI or AI can make savings. That's one issue. This is a different issue where AI itself is basically leading, allegedly, that firing process, which we know that AI doesn't have judgment. We know that AI doesn't have agency. We know that AI doesn't have empathy. And we know that AI it's not across all those intangibles. Hiring, firing process is extremely complex for anyone that's been involved with it. And it's more than just those KPIs. That's the easy thing to look at. So yes, use those tools to give you the best possible outputs, like mapped against a matrix. Check that matrix yourself and then look at all of the additional variables as well before making a decision. But yeah, just great shout to use the phrase human in the lead, because I think that's something I'll try to adopt more as well myself going forward.
Yeah, I think you make a great point there as well. And I see another one in the chat here about obviously humans are biased. AI is biased because it was created by humans. But at least when it's a human, there's someone that bears that burden of responsibility. And I think that actually carries into our next story pretty well. Like who do you make responsible for these types of situations?
Yeah, exactly. So going on to our next story. So XAI has now sued a Grok user that it accuses of generating illegal sexualized images of children. So, obviously it's not a nice news story, but we'll know that several times in the news over the past year, 2 years, several AI tools have been accused of being able to create images that they should never be able to create. And I would say it's fair that the news coverage has been predominantly about Grok. So Grok seems to have the biggest issue with creating this type of content. Now, this is seismic, in my opinion, because what they're doing is they are saying this individual prompted our tool to create something that is objectively against the law. There's no two ways about that. And they are now suing that person because of doing so. Now, this is very interesting. Should that person have used any AI tool to create this? No. If that person was found to have created those images or be possessing of those images, should they go to jail? Yes. However, should a company, a massive company, sue that individual through the private courts as a way, in my opinion, of almost absolving itself of blame? Or should the process be, we have created a system that has a harness that means that this type of content can never be created. And if somebody is found to have jailbroken our frontier model to do this, what we will do is we will instantly ban them and we will report them to the police, at which point it will become a police matter. For me, that's the correct process. I think what's happening here, again, is that the XAI seem to be positioning the fact that, look, it's not our fault if people happen to be using our tools to create these images, and it should be on them, which for me is a dereliction of duty. But that's just my take on it.
Yeah. I think that XAI has this wrong here. I do think that person should be held responsible and investigated, brought to court, all of that good stuff, because obviously this is a horrible situation, but I think XAI also bears a burden of responsibility here. Why isn't your tool set up with the right guardrails to prevent something like this from happening? I highly doubt that other image generation tools and companies would allow you to do something like this. It seems like a pretty easy guardrail to set up. Obviously, nothing's 100%, but this should be close to it. But I think this is really like the first. I think every AI company is watching this story right now, because this really sets it up for the future of as a precedent towards who bears the burden of responsibility, which I think is very important. Like if this person is found guilty and XAI has no consequences, I don't know what type of future that really leads to. So yeah, according to the lawsuit, like Sam mentioned, a Grok user generated child sexual abuse material using Grok. XAI says the user intentionally abused the system and they're suing the individual directly. That individual is going to lose that court case, obviously. It's just a question of if it goes a step further now and then XAI is also somehow legally bound in this situation. And I think that's why every AI company is watching this. Like, who's responsible? Is it the model? Is it
100%.
developer? Is it the person using the model?
And it goes, I mean, we're at the very extreme of what AI tools should never be used to create for, right? But if this does go in the way that we're expecting it will go, then let's go back to that second story we had today around copyright, yeah? It becomes the same thing. If a company, if let's say I go into my AI tool and say, hey, I want you to create an album in the style of the Beatles and put my name on it, yeah? Do I then become liable for copyright theft? Or is it the company? So this is why we need to watch this case extremely carefully. And look, we've talked about this before. Elon Musk is not a stupid person. He will have picked this specific case for a specific reason. It's in South Carolina. I would imagine the jury or the judiciary there is probably set up in a certain way that him and his team have analyzed, which means it's more likely to go down a certain route. Again, I do not have a law qualification. I'm not a magistrate. It must be an extremely complex case to preside over. But for me, if I was in that position, I would be like, you have your own individual responsibility. I'm going to absolve this personal suing. And instead, I'm going to pass this over as a police matter for this individual to be dealt with to the full letter of the law for possessing images or trying to create images according to federal state legislation that already exists for that particular crime. So yeah, I think it's really, and as Philip says there, does the drug dealer have any responsibility? Do they just say it's not my responsibility? Is it the addicts themselves that get themselves addicted? It's very, very complex. And I think all of the AI software companies are going to be watching this to see how it plays out.
Yeah. I personally don't think that comparing it to the copyright topic that we spoke about is probably maybe the best comparison, because I can really see the other side of the argument to that from the AI company's perspective of fair use. This is, I think, a whole different can of worms here. And I honestly do hope that there is some responsibility and some type of at least public backlash towards, and it doesn't have to necessarily be XAI.
Mm.
I can say that I personally think that Elon Musk overall is a positive for mankind. Sam might say the exact opposite, but in terms of the company itself, like this shouldn't happen in the first place. It doesn't mean that that person shouldn't be held responsible as well, but both should be.
Yeah, I mean, Sam probably would say the exact opposite, but that's because one of us is a closet communist and the other one isn't. So, yeah, I think that's fair, and I think you're right. I think there needs to be whatever comes out of this court case. It needs to be clear that these companies have a responsibility, that no matter what happens, this kind of content can just never be created using their tools, and that if somebody is, then it's passed to the police or whatever, and there's proper legislation behind it.
Yep.
Again, that's going to be it's possible, but it's non-trivial, which means that it will require money. And are these organizations more interested in doing that, or are they more interested in doing other things? Who knows?
Let's just say it's probably much easier to set up guardrails against this topic that we just spoke about in terms of creating images of children, horrible images, versus like finding a way to pay every single creator and creative and artist and musician that ever posted anything on the internet and then compensating them because AI trained on it. It's like two different universes in my opinion.
I think as well, like we talk about this all the time, this particular issue, that this is a red line that surely everybody would stand behind, that, these tools should never be allowed to create this kind of content. Yeah. And the fact that we have to state this so often means that maybe people don't see this as being a red line that we obviously think it should be. Otherwise, why has it not happened already? That's what worries me, I guess. Yeah. So on that cheery note, and I promise I will keep trying to find AI good news. Sorry, I'm gonna do it for next week. Okay, Leor. So thanks everyone very much for tuning in, listening to us on your podcast. We are on YouTube. Leor's going to put that into the link. I'll put it in the show notes as well. I'll link to all of these stories in the show notes. Like over 100 of you again joined us today on Substack Live. Thanks so much for various dialogues and conversations. And Leor, thank you very much for joining me as ever.
Thank you.
Thanks, Temi Top. First time here, always welcome. Everyone's welcome in these chats, whatever they're saying. You'll hopefully realize that Leor and I don't always have exactly the same opinions on things, but have respect for each other. That it's okay to disagree as long as you do so in a way that's respectful. So, thanks very much, everyone. Feel free to share us across your podcast directories, YouTube, Substack, etc. And we'll see you all next week. See you later, Leor.
Bye now.
Thanks, and go slow.